Your baby won't remember what you said today. They probably won't even remember today at all, not in the way you remember things, no clear picture, no timeline, no story they could ever tell back to you. But somewhere underneath all of that, a different kind of memory is already forming. Not the kind you can recall on purpose. The kind that just becomes part of who they are, quietly, without either of you noticing it happening. Researchers call it implicit memory, and it starts forming almost from birth, long before a baby can hold a single explicit memory the way adults do. And the strange, slightly unsettling truth is this: some of the most ordinary things you do every single day are exactly what's getting stored. Not the big moments. Not the birthday parties, not the vacations, not the milestones you photograph and save. The tiny, repeated, completely forgettable ones. The ones that happen so often you've stopped even registering that they're happening at all. Today, I want to walk through 10 specific things, each one backed by research on early memory and attachment, that your baby is quietly absorbing every single day, whether you realize it or not. None of these are dramatic. None of them require money or classes or some new parenting technique you have to learn. That's actually the entire point. The things that shape a baby's earliest sense of the world are almost always the boring ones, repeated thousands of times, not the extraordinary ones that happen once. Think about it this way for a second. If someone asked you what made you feel safe as a small child, you probably couldn't point to one specific day. You couldn't recall the exact sentence someone said to you at age 2, or the precise expression on a caregiver's face during some ordinary Tuesday afternoon decades ago. And yet, somehow, you walked away from your own childhood with a very real, very specific sense of whether the world generally felt safe or unpredictable, whether people generally responded to you or didn't. That sense didn't come from one memory. It came from thousands of moments you can't actually recall, blended together into something that just feels true. That's exactly what's happening with your baby, right now, today, in real time. Let's start with the first, and it might be the simplest thing on this entire list. The tone of voice you use most often around your baby. Not the words, babies aren't decoding vocabulary yet, they don't know what half your sentences mean, it's the tone. Warm, sharp, rushed, calm, irritated, playful. Infants are remarkably sensitive to vocal tone long before they understand language, sometimes picking up emotional shifts in a caregiver's voice within the very first months of life. Repeated exposure to a particular emotional tone appears to shape what researchers call an internal working model, a kind of felt sense expectation about what people sound like, and by extension, what the world itself tends to sue. And like, if your default tone, day to day, across the ordinary grind of feeding and changing and soothing, is warm and unhurried, that's the baseline your baby's nervous system is quietly learning to expect from people. If it's often sharp or rushed, even without any single dramatic incident behind it, that becomes the baseline instead. This was never about being perfect in any one moment. It's about what's statistically true across hundreds of them. Picture the difference between a caregiver who says, "Okay, let's get you changed," in a flat, tired voice 50 times a week, versus one who says the exact same sentence in a warm, easy tone 50 times a week. The words are identical. The information your baby's nervous system is quietly logging is not. Number 2, whether you look up when they call you. Every time a baby makes a sound, a coo, a whimper, a small shriek meant to get your attention, and you respond, even briefly, even imperfectly, something called contingent responsiveness gets reinforced. It's the basic mechanism behind a baby learning. When I reach out, someone reaches back. Miss it occasionally, and there's no measurable harm at all, that's a completely normal part of any real day. But the overall ratio, across thousands of these tiny call-and response moments stacked up over weeks and months, is quietly building a baby's core expectation about whether the world tends to respond to them, or tends to leave waiting. This isn't about dropping everything the instant they make a sound. It's simply about the general pattern winning out over time, the way a mostly answered question feels completely different from a mostly ignored one, even if neat. Her was answered perfectly every single time. Number 3, how you repair after a hard moment. You get frustrated. You raise your voice by accident, or you're distracted and miss something that mattered to them. What matters most here isn't that moment itself. It's what happens immediately after it. Researchers studying attachment describe something called rupture and repair, the small disconnect, followed by a reconnection, a softened voice, a hug, a simple "I'm sorry, I got frustrated, I'm here now." Babies who consistently experience repair after ruptures tend to develop a working model in which conflict is survivable, something that gets fixed, not something to quietly brace against. It's not the rupture your baby's nervous system remembers most. It's whether repair reliably, predictably followed it. In practice, this can be as small as 30 seconds, a sharper tone followed shortly after by a softer one, a moment of distance followed by a moment of closeness. Multiply that small cycle by hundreds of repetitions, and a baby ends up with a working answer to a question they'll spend their whole life quietly asking. When things go wrong between me and someone I depend on, does it get fixed? Number 4, the physical affection woven into completely ordinary moments. Not just the bedtime hugs or the deliberate cuddle sessions, but the small touches layered into a totally unrelated task. A hand resting gently on their back while you're doing something else entirely. A quick kiss on the head while you're walking past on your way to answer the door. These tiny, almost automatic touches, repeated constantly across a day, are part of what shapes a baby's baseline sense of physical safety in your presence, distinct from the touch that only happens specifically because they're up, set, or need active soothing in the moment. Number 5, how you react when they make a mistake, even a small, completely unremarkable one, spilling something, dropping a toy, getting a simple task wrong. Your face, in that exact moment, is doing far more teaching than your words ever could. A relaxed, unbothered reaction teaches a baby that small mistakes are just ordinary, forgettable events, the kind that happen constantly and don't need to be feared. A visibly frustrated or tense reaction, even a completely understandable one on a hard day, teaches something quite different, that mistakes carry weight, that they need to be anticipated and watched for. Over years, this pattern becomes part of how a child relates to their own errors, long before they'd ever consciously remember the specific spilled cup, the specific dropped plate that helped shape it in the first place. Somewhere around the 100th spilled cup, a baby isn't learning anything new about cups anymore. They're learning something about what happens to them, specifically, when something goes wrong. Number 6, the predictability of your daily rhythms. Not a rigid schedule managed down to the minute, just the general shape of a day. A nap that tends to land around a similar time. Meals that follow a roughly similar rhythm. A bedtime routine that unfolds in approximately the same order most nights, even if the exact minutes shift around. Predictable rhythms give an infant's nervous system something researchers describe as a felt sense of safety, because the world becomes at least partially foreseeable, rather than something that has to be braced for fresh every angly time. This doesn't require perfect structure or a color-coded schedule on the fridge. It just requires enough repeated pattern that a baby's system can genuinely start to anticipate what's coming next. A nervous system that can predict what's coming gets to spend a lot less energy bracing for the unknown, and that saved energy shows up, eventually, as a calmer, more settled baby. Number 7, how you talk about them when you think they're not really listening. To a partner, a relative, a friend on the phone, while your baby happens to be sitting right there in the room. Even before babies understand full sentences, they pick up tone, emphasis, and emotional charge with striking accuracy, often more accurately than adults expect from someone who can't yet talk back. Talking about a baby with warmth and delight, even in a completely passing comment to someone else, contributes to the exact same emotional climate as talking to them directly. Talking about them with frustration or exhaustion, even in a way that's entirely understandable on a hard week, is landing on that same absorbing system underneath, whether or not the baby can parse the specific words being used. Number 8, the overall emotional climate of your home, specifically how stress tends to get handled between the adults in the room. Babies are remarkably attuned to caregiver stress signals, raised voices, tense body language, a sudden shift in the emotional temperature of a space, even during conflicts that have absolutely nothing to do with them directly. It's not that tension itself is harmful in any single isolated moment. Tension is a completely normal part of any household. It's the overall pattern that matters, whether tension is typically followed by resolution and a return to calm, or whether it tends to linger unaddressed for long stretches. That pattern, repeated across months and years, becomes part of a baby's earliest template for what relationships in general are supposed to feel like. It's worth saying clearly, disagreements between the adults in a household are not, by themselves, something to fear or feel guilty about. Every real household has them. What a baby's nervous system seems to be tracking isn't the presence of tension, it's the reliability of the return to calm afterward. Number 9, how you handle goodbyes and reunions. The specific moment you leave the room or leave for work in the morning, and the specific moment you come back through the door later. Attachment researchers have found these separation and reunion moments to be unusually information-dense for an infant's developing expectations, almost disproportionately so compared to how brief they actually are. A brief, warm acknowledgement before leaving, and a warm, genuinely present reunion when you return, both help build what's called a secure base, a working model in which separations are understood as temporary and safe, rather than something threatening or unpredictable. This doesn't require elaborate goodbye rituals or anything performative. It just means noticing that these small transition moments carry more weight than they seem to on the surface. A distracted, half-present goodbye and a distracted, half-present hello cost almost nothing in the moment to fix, and yet they happen to be two of the most closely studied seconds in a baby's entire day. And number 10, maybe the simplest item on this entire list, and maybe the easiest one to accidentally skip on a busy day. Whether you actually get down to their eye level and really look at them, even for just a few seconds, multiple times throughout an ordinary day. Not while scrolling, not while doing another task at the same time, just looking fully at your baby's face and letting them look back at yours. This kind of unhurried, face-to-face attention is one of the most consistently studied predictors of secure attachment in early infancy, not because of any single profound moment, but simply because of how often it happens, quietly. Why, across the span of a completely normal week? Here's the piece that ties all 10 of these together. None of them are dramatic. None of them require money, classes, special toys, or some advanced parenting credential. They're just ordinary, almost invisible in how small they are. Which is exactly why they're so easy to overlook, and exactly why, underneath that ordinariness, they end up mattering so much. Your baby isn't building a memory of any single day. They're building something closer to a statistical average, quietly, across thousands of small moments. The tone you use most often, whether you usually respond when called, whether repair usually follows rupture, whether touch Ts woven in casually throughout the day, how mistakes are usually met, how predictable the days usually feel, how you usually talk about them, how stress usually gets handled in the room, how goodbyes and reunions usually go, and how often you actually stop and really look at them. None of this is about achieving some impossible standard of perfect parenting, because nobody is warm and patient and perfectly attuned in literally every single moment of every single day. And that was never the actual bar the ray search is pointing to. What it keeps pointing to instead is pattern, not perfection, the overall shape of thousands of ordinary moments, not any one of them judged in isolation. If you recognized most of these already happening naturally in your home, that's genuinely reassuring information, worth actually sitting with for a second, not something to just nod past. And if one or two of these stood out as things you'd like to be a little more intentional about, that's useful information too, not a verdict on you as a parent, just a small place to put a little more attention going forward. Our ting today. It also helps to remember that your baby isn't grading these 10 things individually, keeping some invisible scorecard of every missed moment. They're absorbing an overall climate, the general weather of your home, not the forecast for any single afternoon. A rushed morning, a short temper on a hard day, a missed call-and response moment here or there, these things get absorbed into an average, and averages are forgiving in a way that any single moment never feels like it is. Pick one thing from this list, Just one, to notice a little more over the next week. Not to overhaul your entire routine, not to add pressure to an already full day, just to notice it a little more than you have been. That's usually where real, lasting change quietly starts, not with a complete transformation, but with one small, repeated adjustment, done often enough that it eventually becomes part of the weather too.